His goal? Reunify the Russian people across Eastern Europe. His tactics? Infiltrate the former Soviet states and stockpile Russia's weapons supply. Moscow correspondent Oliver Bullough says that President Vladimir Putin is on a mission to rebuild his country to its former glory, and reverse the events of 1989, when the Russian Empire dissolved and was left in tatters. For Russia, national intervention is the only means of salvation for the abandoned peoples of the Russian Federation, who are scattered across the former Soviet states, and this spells bad news for the rest of us. On February the 27th, 2014, 6,000 Russian troops marched across the Crimean peninsula in Ukraine and seized military bases, government buildings, and political strongholds. Almost immediately, Russia called a referendum which voted in favour of Crimea joining the Russian Federation. The West denounced the referendum as illegitimate, but it didn't matter, the damage had already been done. Putin was one step closer to fulfilling his dream of reunification of the Russian people.
We need to put a lot of pressure on Russia at the table and not on the war field.
The recent activity in Eastern Europe sounds all too familiar to a series of military events that occurred in the 1930s. Ideological revenge, the flouting of international laws and military expansion. Putin will stop at nothing to rebuild his 20th century superpower. And history has a habit of repeating itself. Putin called the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. To Putin, it was an almighty failure, and rescuing those abandoned Russian minorities in former Soviet states is a political necessity. Which is why in August 2014 Russia ignored EU sanctions and invaded Ukraine. Rewind the clocks 75 years, and you can see something similar is happening in Central Europe. Carefully, Nazi Germany is taking Europe in its grip, and for the time being without even firing a machine gun. Fearful of provoking another war, Europe appeased Hitler in his demands to reunify the German people. With a little hindsight, it seemed unfair to blame Germany alone for the start of World War I. So what if Hitler wanted to rectify the disintegration of his country? After the First World War, Germany was divided, and parts of the country on the German-Czech border were given to Czechoslovakia. This area was called the Sudetenland. And in what appears to be a reasonable request, Hitler was given permission to take back parts of the Sudetenland that were predominantly inhabited with German-identifying people. But as we all know, he didn't stop there. Soon Germany had taken over the whole of the Sudetenland, breaking international law. But not wanting to rile Hitler, the Allies just stood and watched. It wasn't until Germany marched into Czechoslovakia that the Allies realised they had made a terrible mistake. And that's exactly what's happening today in the Ukraine. Russia's annexation of the Crimea led to an outright invasion of the rest of Ukraine. Despite a ceasefire agreed in Minsk in September 2014, Russia marched on, and like the Allies in 1938, the West did nothing.
European peace is what I am aiming at.
Britain, Germany and the USA have ruled out using force to stop Russia taking over the Ukraine because they fear a nuclear war. In the meantime, Russia is only getting stronger, just as Nazi Germany did in the 1930s. Polish statesman Lech Wałęsa was responsible for helping end the Cold War. He believes that Putin's involvement in Ukraine could result in the death of tens of millions. In his own words, how can we win if he is boxing and we are playing chess? If we leave it too late, could we have another Third Reich on our hands? Putin has announced that by 2020 his country will claim military superiority over the West. The Russian military modernization project is well underway, which plans to put Russia at the forefront of modern warfare technology. Military officials from the Global Security Foundation, Plowshares, have reported that already Russia possesses 8,500 nuclear warheads. That's 1,000 more than the United States. In February 2015, Russian spies were caught on American soil, and 2 Russian bomber aircrafts were spotted flying over the English Channel. Alarmingly, news broke in March 2015 that if the West had got militarily involved in the annexation of the Crimean peninsula, then Russia was prepared to take nuclear action. Putin's words are not empty threats. One false move, and we could all be in danger. Paranoia, military tension, and fear-mongering. The Russian Federation may be engineering the perfect environment to initiate a Third World War. In 2001, 2 German Holocaust survivors sued the US government and then President George Bush's family for $40 billion in compensation. They claimed that the Bush political dynasty had financially benefited from Auschwitz slave labor during World War II, and that it was this money that had established their family fortune and political empire.